Now, what Napoleon really wanted was a second front to spread British resources thin and open a new theater of war where he could achieve victory. But America is pretty big, so invading it would be a challenge. That's why instead of the American heartland, Napoleon would likely focus his efforts on the British colonies. He might attempt to capture strategic points like New Orleans or retake the recently captured West Florida, which was claimed by both Spain and America. In fact, Spain was already allied with Napoleon, so retaking this territory wouldn't just be about punishing the Americans, it would actually help out their allies. There's also the option of targeting the Caribbean islands controlled by the British. Jamaica and Trinidad would likely be the targets here. Gaining control of these islands would open up a whole new supply line for the West Indies, and maybe even allow the French to invade the mainland of Spanish America. And speaking of Spanish America, it's entirely possible that if the US was fighting alongside the French, Napoleon would use this opportunity to support revolutionary movements across the region. After all, these colonies would make great allies, and having puppet states in America would further weaken the British. But ultimately, Napoleon's dream was to open a new front against the British colonies. This was easiest in Canada because of the proximity to the US. However, he might have used American forces to invade the West Indies, or even attempt to blockade the British supply lines to North America, which would have been based out of Halifax. But one thing's for sure, Napoleon would have loved to have American troops storming the beaches of Lower Canada, joining their fight against the British regulars. But how would the British react to American troops joining the fray? Well, it's hard to say because in our timeline, the War of 1812 was extremely unpopular in Britain. They just didn't feel the need to fight a war in North America, especially against the Americans, who they were trying to trade with. But if they had lost valuable territories to the Americans, then that would change everything. The British people would likely rally behind their flag, feeling that the very survival of the empire was at stake. It's also possible that the American people would feel the same way. After all, if the US had taken losses in the South or the West Indies, then public opinion would have been much harsher on the French. So ironically, American and British interests could end up aligning. This changes the equation for the war drastically. The US and Britain would likely be fighting tooth and nail for every inch of North America. And depending on how strong the American military was, this could go either way. If the US was able to hold their own, then maybe the British would have lost valuable manpower trying to subdue them. If the US got absolutely crushed, then the British could move west without fear of interference. If the war ended with the status quo ante bellum, then nothing would change because the British never lost any territory. But if the British did lose territory, then we could see some massive changes.